What's an outlier? What's an anomaly? What is that?
A very unique circumstance,
Yes,
like an outlier, something that is not consistent with other patterns that you see.
exactly. If we did, if we did a frequency distribution and everything was kind of, clustered together, it'd be that dot way up off the chart up here. You have those. You have those. They prove the point. And so now, when we do theoretical work and when we do lit review, we're focusing on that pattern that's right there together, not the one that's way out here to the right. The Fox News kooky crazies or the MSB and NBC kooky. We're trying to stay in the center when we're doing our lit review. We're not trying to quote the crazies and the outliers, the exceptions to the rule kind of thing. And the thing is, my situation was one of those outlier situations that only occurred in one time, one place for 2 years, and then it was gone. Then they had a new middle school that they all went to, and everything's back to normal. But for those 2 years, Collins didn't work for me. All right, now, fast forward 30 years, we have a pandemic. Ouch. Changes everything. We had planes fly into a building in 2001, changed the world. We had an economic crash in this country in 2007, and the greatest heist of wealth ever seen in the history of the world in 2007, 8, 9, 7, 8, 9. We saw the biggest bailout in the history of this country when the next administration came in. Then we saw COVID and the biggest economic collapse since the Great Depression. All those things has shaped a new reality. Those are all anomalies. Those are all outliers. They just happen boomity boomity boom. Sometimes that happens. And now the new reality is the what I experienced at that junior high school in inner city Charlotte 30 years ago is now the norm. I would have never guessed that. I'll tell you, I'm not telling you I'm smart enough to predict this. I'm not. I just knew Collins didn't work for me. Now, and so what I've always said about Collins, even 10 years ago or when I first started working in this, is Collins may not, your mileage may vary. Collins may not work for you. He's a great theorist. His book is good. I'm not saying it's not. We still use it today, but it may not work for you if you. And my point with Collins is he's the easiest to see that every theorist doesn't work for everybody every time. That should influence your lit review. That's how we started this. Is take the parts that fit you, but don't say, well, everything about that doesn't fit me, so I'm not using him. That's not how lit review works. You take the parts that work for you, that support what you're trying to do, that inform your research. If we just pick people that everything they said fit us, we'd have a hard time finding anybody to lit review. That's the biggest problem I have with my students on lit review is they think too much. Don't think. You're hurting the team. Pick the one thing that if Collins, I love Collins's hedgehog. I'm gonna use it. Now I'm not too big on his personnel notions, but I'm gonna use his hedgehog. That's okay. You pick the things that you need on your lit review that inform your view of the world. What is qualitative research? Qualitative is interviews, observations, and documents. You're doing qualitative research, and you must be selective. You must filter. That's what you're doing when you're reviewing documents. You don't just bring it all and just throw it all on the paper and say, here it is. You pick the part that makes sense for your argument, for what you're trying to look into. Leslie asked me how did Teresa's come back at 25? Well, I can tell you, she's got 278 pages in the body of her dissertation, and over 100 of it is in lit review. Just she's written everything about everybody. Was not discreet. She didn't discriminate when she wrote. I love her. I mean, she does great. She's a great writer, by the way. But she put everything that everybody said and quoted it too closely. That's how you come back from the editor at 25 when the editor gets it all attributed to everybody. And that's what they have software to do. When she got all the quotes attributed to everybody, and that, or that weren't attributed to everybody, as she wrote all this stuff in there, all of a sudden, boomity boom, it went up. It does most every time. But we don't just kitchen sink the lit review. We're very strategic in our lit review. We pick the different people who support our notions. We don't bring all of Hertzberg. We don't bring all of Fulling. We don't bring all of Argers. We don't bring all that stuff. We take the pieces that fit in our view of the world, because that's what qualitative research is how you make sense of the world. I'm going to repeat that. That's pretty profound. Qualitative research is how you make sense of the world. You must be intentional. You must be disciplined in your inquiry. You must make sure that you're not quoting lunatics and people who just made stuff up. I use Fox News and MSNBC as the examples of either end, where half the stuff they say is accurate, the other half's just completely made up. That's the problem with those kinds of places. You must be discreet when you have places that have a political agenda or some sort of agenda. You have to be a smarter consumer of your information, of communication. Communication goes along with literature review. I always talk about that part of it, because communication is information. And that's what you're conveying to your reader, information. The lit review is how you communicate to the world the ideas that you have and what you're thinking the world, how the world works. It's your view of how the world works. That's what you're doing. You're communicating that to your reader in your lit review. And if you understand that, it becomes more of a narrative than just blocks of text. You're writing a narrative. You're weaving a story in chapter 2. Too many times I get chapter 2s, they're just copies and pastes of blocks of quotes. That's all they are. And you can't, it doesn't tell a story. It doesn't communicate your story or your view of the world to the reader. Literature review is communication. Let me say that again. Literature review is communication. It's your view of the world, how you communicate that to your reader. You use these people who came before you and did this research. Not everything is good. My favorite guitarist of all time, I don't agree with very much about him, other than he's just the best player I've ever heard. Not even close. Nobody else can. I mean, he's just so far above everybody else I've ever heard. And I have, I have a Blackie Strat. I have a custom shop Strat, a Blackie, an Eric Clapton. If you know anything, it costs more than my first new car. But and I have a Fender Tweed, but mine don't sound like him when I play. I can tell you that. Not at all. I have a Martin behind me over here. When he plays, when he finger pick and plays acoustic, plays his Martin, I have a Martin right behind me. I don't sound like him. But I don't agree with. I mean, that's the part of him that I want is when he plays. I like it when he sings too, but I love it when he plays. But now his political part of him, not interested. you take the part that you want from the theorists and from the people who have written, from the published works. You take the part that fits your worldview. I don't care about his politics. He can play though, like nobody I've ever seen or heard. I've seen him. I'm not wearing my T-shirt this morning. I was wearing my T-shirt the other day from '79 when I saw him at the mosque in Richmond. Somebody asked me about that T-shirt. And they said, "Where'd you get that?" I said, "At the mosque in Richmond. I was at this show in 1979." Now that wasn't the first time I saw him. I saw him in '75 at the Double Door in Charlotte. Him and Carlos Santana. I've been seeing him now. How many years is that? Since '75, pretty regularly. Since '75, I go somewhere. I went to London and saw him at the Albert Hall in what year was that? The 40th anniversary Cream reunion. I guess that was 2008. But I don't follow him for his political notions. I just want to see him play. And so Matt brought up last time, some people don't like some of Hertzberg. Some people don't like a lot of all people. I don't like all, as I've used the example. I don't like all of Colin. That doesn't mean that somebody else won't, or that they don't have things that of value. This long-winded rant is about picking the pieces of everybody. If we can't include everything, be selective in what we're pulling from these people. If what you want to communicate to your reader, if you do that, you won't have 100 pages in your lit review, and you won't come back from the editor not being able to get it under the mark and have to work on it. Now we're probably going to have to cut about 60 pages out of this thing. That's the subject. That's the part that she and the other. But you get married to that stuff. But about 60 pages needs to go. It's of no value. It's contradictory, and it's not just decided. It's contradictory. I read through it again yesterday, and it's this person said this, but this one said that. I want to know what all get a direction here. Get going one way. You got to defend this thing now. And so we're going to, you get married to all that stuff. Those pages are like birthing babies. Pardon my metaphor here, but you get in and you just, you have such an attachment to them that you can't turn them loose. You can't get away. All right. Enough of the rant this morning. Today should be a fairly short day. Leslie's first up today. Let me share my screen. We're going to save Collins till our last time that we get together in a couple of weeks. So let's look at our weekly schedule as we normally do. Let's see if I can get my grid view going. All right, so today is Saturday, November 11th. Today we're going to cover communication, our discussion boards. We're going to talk about those. Starting next week, you'll do Collins, and Merriam chapter 2 is what we talked about. Is Merriam is your qualitative book, and you'll read the chapter 2 in it about qualitative data book that I just gave you a preview of. And here's, you got 2 questions on him, and then you've got a video. So, we're winding down here. We're going to spend, I'll give you a couple weeks, couple questions on Collins, and then I want you to start reading Merriam chapter 2. Let's look at that. Let's see, did I put anything? I didn't. We'll look for that later. I'm going to put something here on Merriam chapter 2. I think I'm going to put a synopsis of what's important there for you. I'll do that this week, or I'll get that done later today. I'm going to write that in my notes, Merriam. I want to summarize Merriam for you. Merriam is our qualitative book that you'll use in 738. But I wanted to introduce now because I'm telling you, you just heard the rant why I think that's important for you to hear that now. So I'm going to put under under this coming week, later today, I'm going to put a synopsis of Miriam's chapter 2. I like to summarize things, and we'll do that. All right. So first up today is Leslie. What we're talking about today is barriers to effective communication. And Leslie told us about her personal story, and I'll let her pick it up from there.
So I talked a little bit about what I experienced in a previous organization with an organizational barrier of status differences. I think when you work in education, and I would say specifically higher education, we get very focused on titles and
Yes.
and degrees, which I mean, I can understand that to some extent, but I think some of that does not allow for us to be able to hear other people's point of view. And so I gave the example of when I became a dean of students, I was in my early 30s. Someone was let go, and I kind of got called up the next day to say, hey, we're putting you in this role. Are you prepared? We'll see. So let's do it. So I reported to an executive vice president who I shared in my post had many years of experience in higher education, but not in student affairs. And so he was very supportive, but he I had a little bit more knowledge in terms of practitioner experience. But because I reported to him, I didn't always have a seat at the table to be able to discuss student voices and concerns. And because I didn't have the title of vice president, I wasn't always listened to. And so, flash forward a year later, and I reported to our provost, who very nice man, but he, I mean, had even little knowledge of student affairs work. And it was an odd reporting structure at the time. And when I would meet with him, I didn't need necessarily his support in goal setting or directional changes, but I really needed his support to be able to move things forward for our students, to have some of those political conversations with our CFO or others around the table at cabinet. And that just wasn't something that was done. And so I was able to work with our president at that institution to make the change to move the reporting structure that I could report directly to her and sit on the cabinet. And although sometimes I felt like I was a little kid sitting at the big kids table, it still allowed for me to be in those conversations with the other vice presidents and to allow for them to hear the student perspective, because that's what really was being missed. We weren't getting things done for our students that needed to be done because we were so focused on who was saying it and the title of that person. And so in my current role, I really try hard to make sure that all of my staff feels like they are being heard. And an example that I gave in that was I do kind of these meeting up meetings. And so every semester I meet with those staff that report to my direct reports. And this isn't a meeting to say, let's snitch on your supervisor or tell me what's not working, nothing like that, but really just to hear from them what's going on. How are things going? What perspective can you give? Because it's important to be able to hear them and allow for them to be innovative, because that's truly what's going to move the organization. And then I also implemented a big idea contest for my whole entire division, because I think it's important. We get stuck in the mundane everyday work, and we need to feel challenged. We need to feel supported and bringing ideas to the table. And so we did that, and I had about 10 ideas that have come to me. So we're sorting through that to be able to figure out how we can make a difference for our students.
Excellent. All right. I'm going to stop my share. I want us to talk about this one for a minute. Got two scenarios here. Leslie was in a job, and the first one she had a VP that didn't move her along. And then she had a second one that didn't move her along. Let's take that now and talk about a couple of things. Not saying that this is what happened to Leslie, but let's look at this from two perspectives. She said she does these talk ups where she's allowed people, beneath to talk, and then she moves that information along. Most cases where there's a stop at the mid-level of the organization where information never gets to the top, one of two things are happening, sometimes both. First is those mid-level people, or the VPs at Leslie's level, are allowed to stop the communication. They're allowed to do that. Whose responsibility is that? That if they're allowed to stop the information, to keep the information at their level, where they become little warlords with power, using communication as power and ammunition and weaponizing communication. Who is allowing them to do that?
President.
Yep.
That's exactly
President.
right. That's exactly
Yes.
right.
Right.
Now, some leaders like that. Some leaders like that. Their subordinates, that next level down, the VP, we'll say president, vice president, at the vice president level, that they're like little warlords fighting among themselves. Why do they like that? Power, but
Control.
Control. Power and control. And if they're fighting one another, who can't they try to overthrow? The leader,
Themselves.
the president. And so some of them intentionally, some leaders take all their top lieutenants, we'll call them vice presidents, and set them in silos and setting them fighting one another. Because they can't power, but they allow them to be the buffer to them and keep them from having to deal with the day-to-day. They don't want to hear it. Because they let them weaponize that. Other times they're required to stop it. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that I don't want to hear that feedback. So today's examples from Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools, the new superintendent came in. First thing he did was reorganize and hired 6 people as assistant superintendents for quality control, regional assistant superintendent for quality control. They hired a curriculum person and a secretary. So we hired 18 people. They cleared out the 3rd floor of the Ed Center, put them all in there, moved all the communications down there. One of my friends, John Freeze, applied for the job. I recommended him. I was senior high chair at the time. Got the job a year later. We're playing golf. I hate this job. All I get is complaints. John, did you not understand what the job was? You are the complaint department, so the superintendent doesn't have to deal with it. They were required to stop all the complaints at that level. So you have that buffering layer. This is, gosh, I could quote 1,000 different studies. I won't go down time, but what Leslie experienced is common. In an organization where the leader seeks to isolate themselves, either from people trying to overthrow them or from problems from the customers. The students were the customers in her. You understand, in higher education, the student is the customer. They're trying to isolate themselves from customer complaints. Neither of those is good. Let me share my screen again. So the notion here is that it doesn't matter the reason why. The information is not flowing to the top either, and that's intentional, is my point. Either we want it to be weaponized so that they won't overthrow us, or we don't want to hear all the complaints that are coming from the customers. And so we make the mistake of thinking in organizations that the information is not getting to the top because of these people at that buffering level, the vice presidents. It's not, they're allowed to do that.
Mhm.
Understand, they're being allowed to do that. If you're the leader of the organization, you have to open that barrier, and that flow's got to come to you, but you got to deal with it now. You know, the information's out there if you want it. They're not a bunch of bullies taking your lunch money and keeping it from you. You're allowing it to happen as a leader. I see that in organizations more than I want to. The leader isolates themselves intentionally, one way or the other, because they don't want to have to deal with it for whatever reason. They're busy doing something else, so they don't manage conflict well. Communication is conflict, by the way. Communication is conflict. People are communicating their needs, their wants, because they're not getting their needs met. That should flow all the way to the top. There shouldn't be a barrier at that level. If there's a barrier, it's because the leader is allowing it to occur. You got to understand that. Not to try to, not from a negative perception, but to understand that when you get in leadership roles, you have to do what Leslie talked about there. You have to lead down. You have to open that channel down so that information can flow up to you.
Mhm.
And you have to be intentional in that. You want to hear the information all the way down to the lowest level of the organization. It has to flow all the way up, especially from the client system. And again, in Leslie's business, the client is the student. If that information never gets all the way up to the top, how is the organization serving the client system? And we're going to talk about that when we get to barrier and gambler's fallacy later on. If you don't stay responsive to the client system, you will not stay in business. Just because you were in business last month or last year or 100 years ago doesn't mean you'll be in business next week, next month, or 100 years from now. That's a fallacy in that. That communication has to flow. There are barriers. If there are barriers like one that Leslie describes, it is intentional. You got to understand that. The leader doesn't want that information. The leader doesn't want it. You will not be successful as a leader until you allow that information, that barrier at that next level down to open up. You will not be a successful leader. All right. Barry, talk about, are you with us? Is Barry still with us? I saw him a minute ago. Yeah,
I'm here.
His camera's just not on. Barry, talk to us about gambler's fallacy.
So, gambler's fallacy. Good morning, everybody. And please pardon my tardiness. Gambler's fallacy is the idea, as Dr. Lamb has shared with us so many times, that just because something worked in a previous time, it's going to work again. And so I used my home church as a point of reference, which I was always also employed by them at the time, we're talking 20 years ago. And so the church started in 1954, pretty much a nucleus, a group of people. It was in the center of a community. So people were commuting to the church, as extremely family-oriented. Transition to the 1990s. Well, people have moved out, so they're no longer in the community. And the other thing is that there are choices. Just like with fast food, with education, there's not just now public education, there's private education, there's Montessori schools, there are options. And so people are not pigeonholed to that one option. Well, they took for granted that what worked in the 1950s was going to work in 1999 and 2000. Now in 2023, so at that point, I was a youth leader. And so we had over 100 active young people in the church. Now the average age of the church is 60. And all of the people that the pastor, the power brokers, I'll call them, that the senior pastor kind of relied on, they're all deceased. And so now the church is in a pickle, if you will, because he rejected innovation. So I would propose ideas that could kind of integrate and bridge the generational gap but he avoided those conversations because he did not want to risk the comfort of the older generation, who were, let's be honest, they were the ones who invested the most money. So of course you want to keep them happy. But the risk was they died, and now the young people are gone. So we had people who were accountants, we had educators, we had people who were contractors, we had people who were in the business field that could really develop the infrastructure of the church and create different nonprofits that could create a curriculum that would expand not just for Sunday school, but it would expand to even opening a school. But all of those ideas were rejected. And now I would say 96% of that population is gone. So now, because the innovation was rejected, he assumed that what worked in the 1950s, and when he took the church in the 1970s, he assumed that that would work. He really set the church up for, I won't say for its demise, but he set it up for a prolonged, let's say, stagnation. We'll use those terms. I don't want to say the church is going to die, because I don't believe it will. But I just think if he had made some better choices. I think the other thing, we were talking about communication earlier. One of the other barriers of communication is that sometimes we listen to respond to rebuttal rather than listening to be heard. And so when I communicated, and when other people communicated to the leadership about different opportunities and different options that could move the organization forward, he listened only to rebuttal and tell the reasons why he couldn't do it. And so as a result, the church, he's now deceased, and the church is in it's in a defunct place, to be honest.
Yeah. He didn't want to hear it again. He did not want to hear what the client system had to say. Barry was a representative of that client system, and he had the gate of communication open, but he didn't want to hear it. I mean, that's a continuation of that. A barrier's in place to keep that information from flowing through. And even if, just like Leslie, even if you tell, I don't want to hear that. And again, instead of finding a way, we found ways to rebut and say, no, we can't do that. And so sometimes the communication gets through, but again, in either case, the leader didn't want to hear it. And gambler's fallacy, again, to be redundant, is you think that you'll survive because you always survive. That is not the case. If you don't grow and change, and if you're not responsive to the client system, churches are literally dying out because the older people die and there's no young people to replace them because we didn't accommodate them. We didn't listen to what they had to say and what their needs were. Because, again, it's a cultural thing. It is a cultural thing. There's different types of cultural problems. This is an age cultural thing. Folks are much different now than they were 50 years ago in that church. And so that's the next level of barrier is I don't want to hear it because your culture is different than mine, which leads us to both Brenda and Gary. Gary can't be with us this morning. He's at a conference, but he talked about the cultural divide in terms of the communication divide in terms of language. Mm-hmm. This is the Hispanic community. I shared with you what we did at Parkland. We ran an event for the Hispanic parents and we got 4, and because we just did what we thought. When we went to their community and communicated with Reverend Jose, we went from 4, the next meeting we had 400 because we listened to what Reverend Jose had to say. He was the client system and understood that we had to hold the meeting at a different time. It had to be along when the buses were running, those city buses were running in Winston-Salem. But we listened to what Reverend Jose, but our first event was a complete failure. Now we could have said, well, they just don't want to come. They don't want to be a part. They don't want to be heard. But we went to Reverend Jose. He was one of the 4 who was there and talked to him about what could we do? Well, hold it at a different time. Make sure that's when the buses are still running. Communicate with them this way. This is how they get their information, different than how you get yours. That community gets their information a different way than you do. And so we became more successful. That was a language barrier. Now, Brenda's going to talk to us this morning about cultural barrier, a little different than that. Brenda, you talked about cultural barrier. Explain yours.
Thank you, Dr. Lamb. Good morning, colleagues.
Morning.
I talked about the cross-cultural barrier that I experienced in my current organization that I'm currently working in. As I had earlier mentioned, I work in a public university. And I had just moved, that is in 2021, from a private university to a public university, basically in a very low region, I would say, basically in a remote area. And the culture in that area is that women are not supposed to lead, and women are not supposed to guide or give instructions. And so when I reported in that institution, I was given a position to work in administration, and there were staffs under me, and specifically a male staff. So it was very difficult for us to work together in terms of assigning of duties, because they all believed that they were not supposed to get instructions or guidance from a woman. And so it was very difficult for me to work together with this staff, specifically him, because of the cultural background that was inculcated in them, and getting it out at such a particular point was not easy. And so for me, what I did, because it was becoming a little bit difficult for me to be able to meet the timelines and to do the assignments that I had been assigned, what I did is that I developed a mechanism of working together as a team. If I want to give an assignment, I'll call him. We sit down together and ask questions. How do you think we are supposed to go about it? And with time, I found a working background on how we would work well best. And I want to just point out that this is an issue that has really affected the education sector, and especially pulling down the capabilities of women as leaders in my country, and specifically in very remote communities where cultures have been inculcated that it is men who are supposed to hold positions, men are the ones supposed to lead, men are the ones supposed to guide, and not giving space for women. But I'm grateful that it is something that we are currently working on, just looking for mechanisms on how to erase this culture. I'm not so sure whether it will completely be erased, but looking for mechanisms of working together as a team. Because if you sit down and say, okay, fine, how do you think we are going to go about this? I'm going to handle this, I'm going to handle this. And as Leslie put it clearly, that it reaches to a point where we put aside our titles and just work as a team. You don't look at yourself as a supervisor. You look at the one that you are working together as a team, as a colleague, and you put aside the titles. And at the end of the day, you are able to give out the deliverables. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. All right, so my notes this morning. Here are the most common barriers to communication. The leader wants to avoid complaints or feedback from the client system. They don't want to hear that because it would require them to get out of their comfort level and make changes that they're not personally comfortable with. So they allow those barriers to exist, or even promote those barriers. They require that level of management, that senior level, to stop all those complaints. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to deal with that. Leslie, one of the underlying themes of what Leslie said when she first started youth, we don't want to hear from young people. They have a different perspective. Their culture is different than ours. We don't want to hear from youth. They speak a different language than we do. They speak Spanish, or Hmong, whatever. We don't want to hear from that segment of the population. We don't speak that language, and so we don't value that. We don't want to hear that. Gender, Brenda pointed out, that's one of the barriers. Certain cultures, even in this country, we don't want to hear from women. that becomes a barrier. And then finally, silos, no teams. We want our organization stratified. Brenda touched on that with, instead of trying to bring everybody together as a team, we want those silos. Leslie even referenced that as well. We want the organization stratified so that we can manage it better, and we want that information contained in that silos. Those organizations are interested in titles, the value of what you have to say, or the efficacy, or the truth about what you have to say is dependent upon your title. I had a situation recently where a person said, well, because I have this title, my opinion is the only one that matters. No, that has nothing to do with your title. It has to do with what you say. Is it objective truth or not? It's not objective truth. The issue was, how many visits do you have to make to clinical undergraduate students? Now, I'm not in that business, but the rule is you only have to make one. My recommendation was you make one. And the person said, no, we're going to make 3 because that's the right thing to do. That's your opinion. You're entitled to your opinion. Now, the rule is 1. That's the objective truth, is the rule is 1. Well, I want 3. Are you willing to pay for 3? No, we can only afford 1, but I want 3. Well, then that's your personal truth. That has nothing to do with the objective truth. Is state says 1. Just because you hold a title, that doesn't mean that what you have to say is objective truth. That's just your personal truth. You're requiring 3, but you're only paying for 1. Now, you can hear the truth. You can hear these people are communicating to us. I got involved in this using my adjuncts to supervise student teachers, which that's not their job, but we're doing it because we have the capacity and the qualifications to do that. But now, if you're only going to pay them for 1 visit, you can't require 3. Now, if you want 3, you got to pay for 3. Well, it works. The objective truth is the state only says 1. You set up a system that only pays for 1. Now you want 3, not going to happen. Well, if you want some people who'll do 3, then you got to find somebody else. And so, but his argument was based on, because of my position, I'm right. No, you're not. Sorry, it's not about position. But we get into silos, we get into positions, we get into titles, we get into chain of command. All those things are designed to suppress communication flowing up. That's the entire intent of those. When you see organizations that do those things, and higher ed is, everybody's rank and title and all that. They used to, when I first came to Gardner-Webb, I started a long time ago, about 30 years. I didn't work for Gardner-Webb then. I just worked as an adjunct. But before when I first came to Gardner-Webb full time, about 13 years ago, after I retired from the public school service, 32 years, they even went to when we went to graduation, or we had any formal ceremonies where we were in regalia, they had a list, and they lined you up by rank down to even that. And so, I'm at the front of the line now. I've been there so long, but back then I was at the back of the line. It didn't bother me. But now that we even went to the point where we had somebody with a typed out list that said, y'all line up this way. That's how crazy that was. It was all about rank and time. There are some vestiges of that still there, but that is designed to stop the flow of communication. That's the entire purpose, is to stop communication. Lastly, this morning on this one, we're going to go to Matt, who had a little different take on communication. He talked about micromanagement. Matt, talk to us about micromanagement. Let me pull that. Share my screen.
Yeah, one of the things I talked about was over communication.
Yeah.
That especially if you're in that maybe that, like, not vice president, but you're part of those team of folks that are managing staff or leading staff, that those who are in those director roles, they're kind of over those folks, that those who tend to over communicate, in turn, it's received as micromanagement. It feels as though someone is constantly looking over your shoulder, and that and constantly questioning your judgment. And so I shared about my experience. One of the reasons why I left a particular organization was that I had assistant director within an office that I was working in, who I think some of it had to do with she was finishing up her PhD, but she was very, we had to go through a review process for treatment plans and assessments of things we would do that we would then send to insurance companies for authorization. So I was doing in-home and community-based behavioral health treatment. And so we had these different layers of supervisors, but we had somebody who was sort of across the state that supervised us, because we were required to be supervised at that time by clinical psychologists, which has recently changed, which is exciting. But at that time, we had the clinical psychologist that would provide supervision, had to sign off on the insurance companies required that they sign off on your treatment plans. But then we had an associate clinical director for the Charlotte office that very much felt like she was overseeing operations essentially within our office. And when we went through the review process, they would be two people would review it, and one of those, she would critique it so much, and many of these treatment plans could take 20 hours to do these. So very time consuming, and you'd have to do them really about every 4 months. And so very time consuming. And so when I would send it in, and it wasn't just myself, we started to see it across others, because people start to talk and those things become contagious. But she would be every single thing within that plan was critiqued, and there'd be a series of multiple questions around defending things that were being recommended, or should you consider this? Have you thought about that? And it was always, and I don't think she intended to have it in red, but I think, those kinds of things, people look at those and they get back their plans, kind of like a student, when you get back your thing and it's all in red, you think you've just completely failed. But she did it to every single one of us. And then once we got through that one, the other person who was really our clinical supervisor, which was the psychologist, she had a very different approach. She would pick specific themes around things of, I noticed that you're kind of going in this direction. Tell me a little bit more about that. And it wouldn't take very long, but it wasn't about, a lot of times with the other person, it was really about semantics. Many times how you said something, the way you phrased it, those kinds of things. And so the over communication really led to dissatisfaction by all of us within that office. And I was the first one to leave, particularly because I had other opportunities that came along that were then motivators for me. And then I had this element of dissatisfaction really within my current employment. And so I left because I felt like it wasn't I was being micromanaged, and it led to not having a very good environment. And so overall, just to wrap this up, is every single person left for those same reasons, every single one. And eventually the office closed. They lost all of their clinical professionals, and the office closed. And not one person did exit interviews, or not one person from the organization, because it's a very large state organization, really the largest that serves a specific population within our state, nonprofit organization. But they never asked anybody why they left. And so that associate clinical or associate director is still within the organization doing other things, but the people have shared that was the reason they left. But I think if they had taken more time, and that was my recommendation, is they should be assessing within the folks that they have that are really providing the services for their clientele, for those people who need those behavioral health services, those who are in charge of providing those services, and really even providing the staff and training the staff who work in the homes or in the community base. If they would have assessed and asked us more about sort of the communication, assessing the communication within the organization, I think they would have found and could have prevented that office from having to close. So that was my recommendation. And then the over communication component is that, especially for those different levels within the organization, when you have somebody who's constantly over communicating something, it can lead to feeling as though they don't trust you.
Why do you think, let me go to a quote right quick. Steve Jobs said, "I hire smart people so they can tell me what to do. Why would I hire smart people and then tell them what to do?" Which is apropos to what Matt was just talking about. Why would I hire experts and then try to tell them what to do? I hired them for their expertise. They should be telling us what to do. And that's exactly what Matt's role was to tell this organization what to do with these people, and they had the expertise to do that. So this is a little different take but it circles back to what we talked about earlier today. Why did that person do that? It stopped the communication flow, but why did they do that? Why did the organization allow them to do that? That's two questions. Why did she do that, or he? And then why were they allowed to do that? Those are the questions we have to ask. All right, jump off, somebody.
I would say, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think to some degree on her part, maybe insecurity, to feel the need to prove her superiority and to prove her knowledge base. I could be wrong, but that's my thought.
Transactional rather than transformational or servant. Exactly. Leadership style. I am the expert. I must, transactional leaders, which is the lowest level. I mean, it's not really leadership; it's more management. I don't like the acronym or the label transactional leader. Transactional people, managers. They don't lead. They don't inspire and motivate people. They don't add value. So management. It was about her, not about the clients or about the information. So that's a valid response. And so that leads to the question: why was she allowed to do that? Ultimately, it goes back to the leader was having their needs met somehow by allowing that to happen. Brenda, you've got something. Go ahead.
Listening keenly to what Matt has explained about the challenges that they were going through in that particular organization, I'm looking at the leader who was so full of power to a level that she did not want to empower the rest of the team.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry for that.
Well, again, is that a servant leader? Or is that a transactional leader? See, that's the problem that we get into is she was having her needs met, but was the organization having their needs met? And again, eventually there was some leadership level above her that were having their needs met by keeping her in place, or if she's still with the organization.
Dr. Lamb, can I continue, please?
Yes.
So from what Matt has explained, basically what we've been learning is that as a leader, you're supposed to empower your followers. But this is somebody who probably saw the potential that the followers had, and she was fearful. She was full of power to a level that she did not want to entrust the followers and just give them an opportunity to explore. My worry is that it started small and it continuously grew, but the leadership did not notice that, because they should be signs to tell the leaders that or the CEO of that particular organization that things are not right. If one employee exits, you're supposed even to carry an exit interview and get to know, why is it that you're exiting this organization? Are there areas that you feel that we are supposed to improve on? But if Matt left, another employee left, and eventually the office closed, then also the blame lies with the leadership of the institution. Because apparently what we've been learning in this program is that as a leader, you are supposed to empower. And as a leader, you are not supposed to know everything, because you also borrow from the employers, the ones that you are, the followers. They might be having very good ideas. And I'm looking at it that most of the leaders look at the potential or the capabilities that are within their employees. They don't appreciate, they don't take them positively, but they fear that probably once these employees grow, they might take up their positions. And that is why I'm saying it is very critical when employees leave for you to conduct an exit interview and get to know the reasons to why they're exiting and identify those gaps to improve on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. If you don't want to know, you don't ask. If you don't want to know, you don't ask. Or the corollary is, if you want to know, you ask. You do exit interview. You know, senior leadership or the senior leader in that organization was having their needs met by allowing this person to do this. Maybe they needed for that office to close. Don't know. But in any way, micromanagement stops communication. People think it's an overshare. Nope, it stops communication. That's the notion of micromanagement. But again, it goes back to, are you a servant, transformational leader, servant leader, or are you a transactional leader? Matt, go ahead. And we'll get to Lone.
I'm going to make one connection back to what Brenda and Barry and also Leslie had shared. I think in reflection that somebody feeling like their title gave them permission to be overly critical of those people
Yes.
that they were leading. And I saw that this particular person too had their eyes on that next, seeing somebody else was going out and trying to position themselves to then be that from associate director to a director. So I think there was a little bit of that in trying, like, okay, because I have this title, I'm coming in, so now I'm going to be really critical of you all, so then that they see that I'm doing something, and then when that other person leaves, they'll want to bring me up into that particular position. And I think that makes a connection back to Brenda too, is that I think with the male leadership component of that is just because somehow your gender gives you the position of some kind to then sort of speak down to someone or not be receptive to other people's ideas, which is just another way of using your title or some sort of not who you are as a leader, but just because you have this particular characteristic of some kind. And then kind of the same thing with Barry, is having somebody be there where they're not open to hearing other people's ideas because of maybe age, not listening to those younger leaders. So
exactly. Lonnie, you had something you wanted to contribute?
Yes, thank you. It sounded to me as if they would allow an office to just completely shut down, and as Matt mentioned, without any looking for any feedback or looking for any ways to help the company continue. It's almost as if they were expendable, and that the higher portion of the company or the higher ups weren't even interested in making office to even be open, or to place the folks like Matt who left, but rather just allow the company to just collapse.
Rather die than change. Churches are the worst, but they're not the only. We'd rather go out of business than change. With the idea, gambler's fallacy comes back in. Oh, we'll survive. We always have. Maybe not, but we'd rather die than change. And that's exactly what happened in this case. That branch closed. But we're not going to change. Somebody above her was having their needs met by her behavior. If they weren't, they would have changed her or changed her behavior. You've always got to understand that. Just like we started with Leslie today, those VPs, they were having, you know, somebody above them was having their needs met by having them block the communication flow. I don't want to deal with that, or I want them to have to deal with that, so they can't, you know, they're too busy fighting one another to fight me. And so, you know, I call that warlords. You have all these little warlords. I worked in Charlotte Mecklenburg the last half of my career. Well, actually, the last, 17 years of my career, I worked in Charlotte Mecklenburg, and it was all about kill or be killed. It was warlords every day. But that kept the superintendent from having, you know, from anybody challenging the superintendent. Was all the assistant superintendents, me being one of them, fought like dogs every day, all day. That's what we did. We fought one another. It's just a turf war all the time. You know, you could never mount a challenge against the king because you were always fighting one another. We were just warlords. That is a management strategy, and it stops the information flow, and you don't have to deal with things, and it keeps folks below you busy, and they can't question your leadership or what you're doing or your ability or your knowledge. That's part of it. These are all internal problems with organizations. If you want to be a successful leader, you have to open those barriers to communication. Otherwise, it's not just about your job. It's about your number one job as a leader. This is the most profound thing that I will say today. I don't say many profound things. Most profound thing I'll say today, your number one job as a leader is to keep the organization alive. Let me repeat that. Your number one job as a leader is to keep the organization alive. And you can't put your needs in front of the organizational needs. And those barriers are your needs. If you want to keep the organization alive, the information's got to flow all the way up and down. Otherwise, I use Matt and I had him go last, is because that's what will happen. The organization will die. Circle back to Barry. You know, that organization, if they don't make a change now and hear what the younger people need, the organization is going to die. As I started out this morning, I talked about Jennifer Croymans. Jennifer's principal at Nebo Elementary School in McDowell County. She did her dissertation with the 14 other principals. This is a small district. There's only 15 of them. She did hers on principal self-care. She did her dissertation on principal self-care. And what she found is people who are the generation to be school principals now are not the same as my generation of school principals. I am a baby boomer, born between 1945 and 1959. There's no more of us left in school administration. We're too old. We've aged out and moved on to other things. You can't run schools for like from the central office, like when I was running schools from central office or when I was a school principal. You can't do that. People aren't willing to work 100 hours a week anymore and not have a family life. That's not part of it. And her self-care is found out that schools still, especially out in the rural areas, want to run schools and school districts like we did in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Started to change in the 90s. But we still set up organizations and run them that way. We need to be listening to our teachers, and we need to be listening to our principals who say, we can't work 100 hours anymore. COVID has changed. We have younger people. We don't have enough, and they want a work-life balance. There was no such thing when I was a principal as work-life balance. Wow, people would have thought you were crazy. What are you talking about work-life balance? You work when you wake up, you work until you go to sleep. And then when you get up the next day, you do the same thing. I worked 100 hours every week that I was a high school principal. Every week I worked 100 hours. We were early start high schools in Charlotte. I was there every day at 6 o'clock. I left when the second shift was over at 11. I went home. I slept for 4 hours and I got up and I went back and I worked from 6 to 11 the next day. And on Saturdays, we worked half days. And so you figure that out. You add those up. We worked about 10 hours on Saturdays because we had all the different activities on Saturdays in school, wrestling tournaments and basketball tournaments and all those things, not counting travel time, Friday night football, worked 100 hours every week. That was just the norm. People are not willing to do that anymore. Different generations have come along. We can't continue to run schools the way that we ran them in the 1980s. Can't do it. People aren't willing to do that. People are leaving. People are retiring. We can't find people to do it. If the people that we find don't have the expertise, organizations are failing. One of the school districts that I'm working with, a large district in North Carolina, because of this, because they can't keep good leadership, can't find or keep leadership because of the expectations of working 60, 70, 80, 100 hours a week. They have 55 schools. 17 of them are low performing this year. Let me say that again. They're not a low wealth district, by the way. They're not in the middle of nowhere. They're a suburban urban district. They're not low wealth. 17 of their 55 schools are low performing because they can't find people who are willing to work 100 hours a week. They've set their organizational model up on that. They are failing. As was pointed out this morning, there are other options. Kids are fleeing that district in droves. The ones that can read and write are going to privates and charters. And hence 17 low performing schools in Gaston County. Gaston is not a poor place. And they have 17 low performing schools because they've run the model of the 1980s. And they can't keep quality leadership in their buildings. In some cases, any. We ran a program for them where we took 14 classroom teachers, accelerated them to become assistant principals. They've all got jobs. We've got 10 right now of assistant principals that we're putting through a fast track that are going to be principals at Christmas because the people they've got just won't do it. This is, again, not listening, not understanding the cultural difference of what younger people need versus older people, women versus, making sure that, that we listen to everybody. It was all about who was talking rather than what they had to say, what position they were in. That's how you get to a point where you have 17 low performing schools in a high wealth district. That's how you get there. No communication, not understanding cultural differences, discounting gender, just discounting people who spoke a different, 20% of their population is Hispanic. hardly any dual language. No, not one dual language school, hardly any ESL programs. 20% of their population are not native English speakers. Done nothing to accommodate that cultural, not listening to that community at all. No communication, not having any public forums, not listening to principals, not listening to teachers for what they need to have multiple vacancies across the district. It's all a communication problem. They're looking for a new superintendent. It better not be a beginner. It better not be a beginner. I can tell you that. You better find somebody who not their first time, or it will continue to go bad to the point where they may not be out of business, but they might as well be. It's going to be ugly. It is ugly. Not listening, not understanding that times have changed, thinking that we'll always be around because we've always been around. Gambler's fallacy. Not paying attention. All right. Go right ahead, Barry.
I have two questions. So I was a teacher fresh out of undergrad, and one of the things we learned about was invitational education, about being intentionally inviting. And I'm just thinking, because it sounds like such a contradiction, because I believe that translates to leadership as well, that leaders have to be intentional about being intentionally inviting. That's the idea that you structure your lesson plan, you structure your classroom so that students feel empowered to learn. But I also think that leaders have to have that same paradigm. So it's just interesting that administration pushes that, but they don't exemplify it. They don't model it.
Yeah, we do what we're comfortable with. We deal with people that we're comfortable with. We like our own tribe. The superintendent that just left there, full disclosure, he worked for me a long time ago in another district. He's from there. His family is from there. They're the country club crowd from the country club there, and that's his tribe. That was his. Well, he's not there now, but he just immediately just left. That was his tribe. That was the people that they were comfortable with. The old time Gaston people. All these people moving in. That's them. Not they don't understand that they're now they're now us. They live here, and it was easier to ignore them because they're not part of our group. We didn't accommodate. Going back to Brenda, we didn't accommodate the cultural differences there. They always had men in charge in that district. Women second class. Culturally, if you're poor, second class, don't listen to you. If you speak a different language, not in any class, we don't listen to you. But it was a continuation of of the past from the 1980s, 1970s, 1960s, trying to run schools for a time that no longer exists with people that no longer exist. People aren't as dumb as me. People don't work 100 hours a week anymore. I still do because it's what I do. But I'm not being boastful. That's because I don't know anything else to do. I wish I knew something else to do, but I don't. I spent too many years doing 100 hours a week. If I'm not comfortable unless I do that. But now that doesn't make me smart or better or good or any of those things. It makes me dumb. In today's world, it makes me, I am a dinosaur. I understand that. I'm not being boastful here. I understand that's a problem. That's not what we need. We need people that can get it done in 40 or 50 hours rather than, it takes me 100 to get it done. But we fill up the time, I guess. I just try to do more, but that's not smart either. I'm an anomaly in that I have the time to do that. It's just me and my wife. We're empty nesters. I don't have, all my hobbies I've let drop away. And you get to be my age, you're not interested in things anymore. I'm only interested in my work, but you can't hire people like me. You need young people. You need vibrant people in your organization. You don't need grumbly old people like me. You got to have different people than me in organizations. You can't expect people like me to I won't be around forever. I'm a short timer. I'm a short timer on this earth. I understand that too. I've been on this earth a whole lot longer than I'm going to stay, eventually. But I've also, my organizational life cycle is about to the end as well. You don't need people like me. You need younger, more vibrant people who relate to the people that they're dealing with better than I do. I don't understand a lot of stuff that I have to deal with every day. Just work harder. Well, that's not a solution. In the modern world is telling people to work harder. That really doesn't do it. So understanding that how things worked, just like Barry's example, I'm like his pastor. How things worked during my era are not relevant now. We're going to have to change. You can't keep people like me around forever because we're not in the current flow of how society works. I'm of a different time. That's okay. I'm comfortable with that. But organizations can't depend on people like me. Because there's too many people who aren't like me. You have to run organizations for the client system that you have and the people that you have. Not many people my age going to do what I do because they have other interests, and so I don't. And that doesn't make me better than them. That just makes me different. But you can't build your organization on anomalies or outliers. You have to build your organization for the mainstream, and that's what we're talking about. And the way that we know how to do that is through communication. Matt, you got your hand up.
Yes, that makes me think about what we've read around diversity and the importance of building diversity within an organization. And to your point, Dr. Lamb, about diversity amongst age, it also makes me think about our reading in Collins around the refusing to see what was the point in The Good to Great, where he talks about the refusal to face the
brutal facts. Mm-hmm.
And one of the things in several of the examples of the companies in there where it took them 15-20 years, right, to make this, there was a transition point, but they started that process early on because they were looking at the data. They looked at their numbers. They faced the brutal fact that they were going to have to make a shift, like Kroger, for instance. So Kroger decides, okay, supermarkets is the future. A&P, never, I remember my parents talking about A&P. I was sharing that with my wife. She goes, that's like buy low. And I say, yeah, nobody ever hears you talking about buy low anymore. But they went through the long process of having to realize they were going to really have to invest in completely revamping their stores. And how I think it makes me think about schools, because that's one particular organization we talk a lot about because they're in such a crisis right now. Following the pandemic and really sort of realizing that it is becoming the norm, that school choice is not going away. Diversity within schools is going to continue as we have lots more people with lots of different languages and things like that. But I feel like what a lot of school districts are doing is they're not facing the brutal facts. They want to continue the same organizational structure. They want to continue to, they talk about innovation, but they don't really, it's just a talking point. They don't really look at their numbers and say, like your point to Gaston County, I've got 17 failing schools. I can't just talk about innovation. We're going to have to completely revamp the way that we look at how we instruct. It's going to become hybrid. It's going to have to provide lots of different programmatic opportunities and choice. We're going to have to meet the night that our leaders are going to have to be diverse to represent our population that we serve. So there is this shift, but I think to your point that these brutal facts are going to be they're going to be challenging. But there's the diversity piece and making sure our leaders represent the voice of the people that we serve and our clientele is going to be extremely important in knowing how do we need to adjust. So I just kind of see a lot of connections around that to what we're talking about today.
Yeah. The interim superintendent in Gaston called me. I called Vera. Vera went in and presented them. Vera was one of my recent doctoral students. She went in and presented a proposal. They wanted a proposal on starting a dual language school. They don't even have one to meet the needs of the current clientele. Now, the problem is Vera can start them one. Vera's an expert in dual language. She did her dissertation in dual language. She's been a dual language principal. Vera can do that. She's in the central office there now. She can do that. But the county commissioners won't fund it because their schools in North Carolina and South Carolina, for those of you that are unempowered, school districts are unempowered. What does that mean? It means they have no taxing authority. When the school board of a public school develops the school budget, it has state money, it has federal money, and it has local money. Who has to fund it? The county commissioners. County commissioner races are now district races in counties. You know, nobody speaks for that community, for the Hispanic community that would want a dual language school. Commissioners will never fund it. The school board can't because they don't have taxing authority. They have to go hat in hand to the county commissioners and say, "Here's our budget. Will you fund this?" And because the people, you know, the crowd that's been there forever that thinks it's always going to be the way it's always is, they don't want a dual language school. We can put one in next year if we want one, but they won't fund it. They won't confront the brutal facts that 20% of their school age population is Hispanic. Not going to do it. We'd rather die. Okay, that's the choices that you make. And so that's where you're headed. Is privates and charters are killing them. You know, Lincoln Charter opened another campus over in Lincoln. They've got one on the west side of the lake over here, and North Gaston. North Gaston's lost 400 students. Because that's that bordering area there. They just go to Lincoln Charter now. Gaston Day opened up another satellite. They're just killing it. Private school, they're just killing it. All these privates and charters, church schools are just killing it, and they refuse to confront the brutal facts, as Colin says. So everybody that can read and write is going somewhere else. And who's that leave you with? The students who can't read and write. That's how you get 17 low performing schools in a high wealth district. That's how you do that, is because you don't have any upper kids to balance out the lower kids who can't read and write. Because all the ones that can read and write took other options. That's how accountability works. You don't have enough top ones to cover the bottom ones, if we understood a distribution. We're skewed positively. I know that sounds crazy, but when you get to 738, when you have a bunch of negative scores, that's a positive skew. It goes to the left. Negative skew goes to the right. You have more upper scores. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but that's the way the skew works. We don't have a normal distribution in Gaston County anymore. We have a positive skew. That means we have the majority of our students are below, the students there are below proficiency. It's not a normal distribution. Privates and charters pulled out. It's not a district. They pull from the reading and writing group on the right hand side of the curve. That's how it works. Kids didn't get dumber. You just lost all the ones that can read and write. That's how in a high wealth district you have 17 low performing schools. Performance is not based on growth. Performance is based on proficiency. That's another problem. That's another dissertation, one from Rutherford County with Elizabeth that I'm doing right now. Schools are being required to do MTSS and plan and schedule and work on growth. However, when the school performance report card comes out, it's based on proficiency. How many kids at a proficient level can read and write? Now, Hirschberg part of this is we're setting up a little bonus system for principals if they make growth, not understanding that there's factors that make us stay and factors that make us go. Giving us a little bit more money, but then punishing us on the proficiency side won't work. They think a little bit more money will make principals deal with the punishment they get for not having proficient. If I was running schools right now, I teach scheduling to school districts. I've just been doing a 2-year project in Thomasville, getting them to understand how to master schedule for growth. But if I was scheduling right now for proficiency, it would be completely different than growth. That little bit of money won't keep me. And so what's happening is principals are leaving the job because they're being punished over proficiency because they've got the kids that can't read and write. That little bit of money you give them for growing their low kids. So you can grow a kid, but he's still below proficiency level. If he's not at 70%, if we grow him from 30 to 40, we've killed it. That's 2 standard deviations. We've done a monster job, but he's still at 40. He's not at 70 on the proficiency scale. He still hurts us. But what we're asking public schools to do now is get away from proficiency and only work on growth. And we're giving principals a little bit of bonus money. It won't work. Hirschberg says that won't work. They're not the same things. Satisfaction is not a continuum. There are things that make us stay and things that make us go. Matt pointed that out this morning. He left an organization because of things that make him go. A little bit more pay would not fix that problem. Doesn't change that micromanaging supervisor. A little bit more money for the school principals in Rutherford County won't fix the fact that they're being punished for not having proficiency levels. So they don't understand Hirschberg. Money on growth won't fix that problem. They don't understand Hirschberg. They think satisfaction is a continuum. It is not. There are things that make you happy and there are things that make you not happy. Just accentuating the things that make you happy will not fix the things that don't make you happy. So Rutherford County, we're running a study there right now with one of my doctors with Elizabeth. We're going to, the question is because you're being punished on proficiency level, but you're only being told to only work on growth, is that going to, what does that do to your job satisfaction and your long-term stay or go? And I think what we'll find is it's not going to make them stay. That little bit of money for growth is not going to make them stay. You better figure out something else. And now, talking with Jennifer yesterday, again in McDowell County schools, my suggestion to school principals with the modern folks, and to Matt's point is we got to change and we've got to reinvent schools. First thing we need to do is the dominoes model. We're going to have to do dominoes. What is dominoes? 30 minutes or less, or it's free. What that means is everything that we do in terms of staff development, all these programmatic things that we want to do, we can't keep teachers till dark anymore, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. 30 minutes or less. Nothing that we do after school can last more than 30 minutes because the younger group is all into that now, is into that work-life balance. That's their number one. You need to find, so what that means is during their planning time, during the day, during their state mandate, you better be doing some staff development then, rather than wait until after school. They've worked all day and then want to keep them 2 hours like we've been accustomed to forever in the school business. That's of the 1970s and 80s, folks. That ain't gonna work today. You better be in the dominoes model today, 30 minutes or less, and everybody at 30 minutes, everybody goes home every day. We don't keep people. Now, if we have after school activities, but I'm talking about for staff development, for change, for all the things that we want to do nowadays, for implementing new programs, we can't keep people come back on Saturdays or stay till, school's out at 3:30 and stay till 6. We got to quit that. Everybody's got to go home by 4 o'clock every day. All the teachers have to go home. Administrators need to be home as soon as the buses are all in about 4:30. That needs to be how we run schools now. Period. That's the first change out of the institute. 4 o'clock, everybody goes home. If we're out at 3:30, everybody goes home by 4 o'clock on teachers. Got to do that. I'm telling you, young teachers are all into that. And that's all you got now. Can't depend on old people. There's too few of us left. Who are the majority of your teachers? They're young. Your employees. You can't design a school for me. I'm the anomaly. I'm the idiot of the group. You need to design it for the majority. Again, we go back to distributions. We go back to that frequency histogram or that scatter plot. We got to look at the center, not the outliers. You can't design schools. We run schools for people like me still, and I am the outlier. We got to run it for that cluster in the middle of young people. 4 o'clock, everybody goes home. 4:30, administrators go home. And you can't be texting them and sending them emails. Mm-hmm.
Well, because they can go somewhere else, Dr. Lamb. And
exactly. They can go to privates and charters. And they don't do that to them. They run those as businesses. They don't send, Now, full disclosure, I'm a big fan. We got a lot of privates and charters here in the Lake Norman region, a lot. People here have money. And I'm a big fan of Lincoln Charter. Their head of schools is one of my doctorates. And he sends people. Carl and I don't have a senior moment. I've just finished with 2. He sends people, through our MSA program all the time. I'm a big fan of theirs. But now, one of the things, they run it like a business. They show up at 8 and go home at 4 every day. They don't do all that stuff. I mean, I'm not smart enough to figure this out. I just watch what Jonathan does over there. And they don't have a teacher shortage. They pay salary and benefits, but they run a more modern organization. They don't text and email and expect principals to work 100 hours a week or teachers to work 70. Teachers work 40, 45 hours a week and go home. They don't have a personnel shortage, but they're listening to the client system. They're listening to the people. There's no information. There's no communication block. It goes all the way to the top, and they make decisions based on what the folks in the organization want. We don't do that in public school. We still run it like it's 1980. Just like Bears Church, he'd run it just like it's 1959 when it started. And sometimes you can be out of business and not just know it. You still, the door's still open, but you're actually out of business. That's Gaston County Schools. The door's still open, but they're actually out of business. They have put themselves out of business. The only people who are still there are the ones who don't have any other choices. That one, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, if they're not careful, the state's going to take it over and put it out of business and farm it out to other people. I mean, you got a third of your schools are low performing in a high wealth district. That's not going to continue, folks. That's a dog chasing cars or pros putting for pars. That's not going to be for long. That's the way that goes. Let me share my screen right quick, and you'll pardon me. It'll take me a second here. Thank you for your participation this morning. That concludes our session. I do want to show you this before we go, if I can find it. Let's see. I'm going to post this one for you. Here's my lesson plan from chapter 2. Now, these are the basic types of qualitative research, and as I've told you, ours are all mixed, which means we do a quantitative part, usually a survey or gather information, scores or whatever, and then we do a qualitative part. One of the things that I want to say from our doctoral session this past week with Dr. Jessica Van Cleve, everything doesn't have to fit into one of these types. Everything doesn't have to be a phenomenology, a case study, an ethnography, grounded theory, narrative. It can just be qualitative. These are the different types, but generally ours, we don't do case studies longitudinal. Just understand these are the types. If you were doing standalone qualitative work, these are the types of studies that you would do. It's okay in a mixed method that it's just qualitative research. It doesn't have to fit into one of these categories, is my point. Students Jessica talked about that to coaches last week. Students, when we cover this stuff in classes, you will have it in 738. But students have this notion that their qualitative part has to fit one of those models. In mixed methodology, it can just be qualitative research. It doesn't have to fit the model. Generally, what we do is we survey. We do a sequential explanatory design where we do a survey. And then from that survey, we do descriptive statistics, mean, median, and mode. And we use that to drive the interview questions that we do as the qualitative part. It doesn't have to be an ethnography. A phenomenon didn't have to occur. So that's what we do. Now, we want you to understand the different facets of qualitative, but understand that yours doesn't have to fit neatly into one of those categories. It can just be qualitative research where you ask people, you interview people. Now, if we were doing a convergent design, we would do our survey. And then when we did our focus groups, we would ask the same kinds of questions that we ask in our survey, and we would compare the two. So understand your two choices, those two choices for your dissertation are sequential explanatory design, where you do a survey and analyze it. And from those, you then design questions to ask, why is this way? And what can we do to fix it? That's an explanatory. You're trying to explain what you found and explain what we can do to fix it. In a convergent design, we collect data by survey. And then when we do focus groups, we ask the same questions and we compare the two to make sure that we're right in the recommendations that we make. Either way, that qualitative work does not have to fit neatly into one of those types of qualitative research. It can just be qualitative. It can just be interviews. It can just be focus groups. That's how we do mixed. And so I want to make sure, and I want to introduce that early on here. I'll put my notes for Miriam chapter 2. I'll put my notes in there about that so you can see the parts that we've got. But understand, your methodology is going to be either mixed explanatory or mixed convergent. Convergent is when we use focus groups. Explanatory is when we do individual interviews. That will be the second half. The first part of that is survey. Always survey. That's how you're going to do yours. Because we're working with one individual organization. And we're collecting data from them. And we don't generally collect any kind of performance data We don't collect test score data. That's not, that's over on EDLS or EDCI. We're looking more at the organization itself, rather than the students of an organization. So we're working with the employees. We're working the personnel side here. People ask me all the time, what's the difference in this and the other? We're working personnel. EDCI ladies, a gentleman every now and then, but they're working students. The EDLS folks are working the administration. We're working the employees. They're working that area. We're working employees. We want to know what the employees think. The volunteers, the employees, and nonprofits. And we have tools to do that. We have volunteer functions inventory for volunteers, survey for them. We do a lot of denizen work for the employees, but we're interested in the people who work in the organization. Back to, and why you say, Deol, why does this go? Communication. We're interested in what they think. We want to make sure that we're not blocking, we're not doing that block, we're opening up. So we make sure that we're either talking to a focus group or we're talking to individuals. We want that communication flow. Qualitative is communication flow. And then how you make sense of the world. And the way you do that is by talking with people. That's the qualitative part. Either in groups or as singular people, our qualitative work is talking to people for the purpose of making sure that information, we're practicing what we preach, that organizations ought to have an open flow of communication. When we do our dissertations, we're doing them in that manner to get us in the habit of asking people. If you want to know, you ask. That's the whole purpose of that. That's why that goes with this particular lesson on communication. Is we're going to do that in real life. Your dissertation is going to be a not a theoretical, but a practical lesson in gathering communication or making sure communication is flowing to get you in the habit of surveying and talking to people in your organization. We want the people who you are working. Your dissertation will focus on the people who work in that organization, not its data, not its sales, not the customer base, the people who work there. That communication flow. This is an example that we would expect that you do this, just like Leslie was talking about. She has that leading down where those people come in and can talk. That's what we're talking about. That's a focus group. We want you to practice that, as an organizational leader, to make sure that communication is the lifeblood, because it drives the changes that you make or don't make, and then you die. We got done a couple minutes early here. It's not even quite 11 o'clock. We did really good today. Anybody have anything that they need to share for the good of the group? I told you on these days, we try to keep it short. Follow up on that. We'll be back in, what was it? Let me share my screen so I get my dates right.
December 2nd, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. We got the holiday. I'll post this one in under next week. So we meet again for our final time on December 2nd. We will, we'll get deep into Collins. We've got 2 questions on Collins. We'll do that and we'll finish up. And so we would normally meet a week before that, but because of Thanksgiving, I'll try to meet anytime around that. So it's going to be a little bit of time before I see you again, but I appreciate you being with us. Doctoral studies, different than when I teach in the master's level. This is, you need to be self-directed. Just a reminder, you got to keep up with your reading. You need to be developing you. Doctoral programs are not about me. They're about you. They're about you developing you. I'm not the sage on the stage. I'm just the guide on the side. Remembering that, if you were in my master's law class, it'd be completely different. We'd be going over PowerPoints every week, and we'd be learning all the different laws and all that. And I'd be telling you, your opinion don't matter. The law is the law, and policy. That's not what doctoral studies is. I like to remind you as often as I can. These programs are about you. We tell you in your final defense that the real project was you. That's what doctoral studies are. You've got to develop your own ideas, thoughts, your own philosophies. You've got to be well read. If, I go down the rabbit hole. I start reading one thing and get on something else. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. You need to be as well read and as broad as you can. But again, this is self-directed. This is about you. So I'm very pleased. Just keep up it. Keep after it. Stay up. Don't get sidetracked by the holidays. You got one more hurdle to do. Spend some time on Collins. Collins is good. It's got a lot of good pieces, but learn to be a discriminate buyer here. A consumer of information. Not everything fits anymore. Collins is of his time, and the world has changed 2 or 3 times since Collins wrote his book, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just of his time, but it is good stuff. All right, I'll see you on December the 2nd. Y'all have a good holiday, and everybody be safe.
Same to you. Take
Thank
care,
you for
everybody.
joining us today. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Have a great
Thank you, Dr.
Thanksgiving.
Lamb.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Happy
Bye-bye.
Thanksgiving. Bye,
Bye.
Leslie.
Bye.